All right, 7 o'clock. We'll just begin the meeting. Welcome to the Ascota Township regular board meeting for May 11th of 2020. You have roll call?
Mr. Palmer.
Here.
Mr. Gajewski. Here. Ms. McGuire.
Here.
Mr. Cummings.
Here.
Mr. Nordine here. Mr. Byer.
Here.
Mr. Weed.
Here. All right, for agenda additions, we have 2 items for other number 9 and other number 10.
Miss Quinn, how old are you? 44. And what kind of business do you? All natural hormone balancing. And you signed the lease. With whom? The landlord's name was Smith.
What's the topics for the items?
No.
Hang on a second here. I'm trying to manage here. For some reason, it doesn't bring people in muted automatically. And I've still got people coming in, going out and coming in. All right, other number 9 is quiet titles for Woodland Drive water main. France's frontier with Italy. It's the highest peak in the Alps. And equals for 600.
Jeffrey.
And number 10 is advertisement of the ECWAG grant. Does anybody have anything else? Okay, is there a motion for the agenda?
I'll move that we approve the agenda with the additional items.
Support.
Support Ms. McGuire, or motion by Ms. McGuire, support by Mr. Palmer. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Any
Aye.
opposed? All right, motion has passed. All right, for consent agenda, any comments for that? Sorry, let me go down here. We got the regular board meeting minutes of April 27th, special meeting of April 29th. Any comments?
I would like to I would like to have the emails that I sent to the board dated 4/29/2020 and 5/1/2020 be made part of the record, please.
What meetings, excuse me, what emails were those, Jamie?
The 2 that I sent prior to, one was prior to the special meeting and one was after.
I've got a, let me pull it up here. Apologize. On page 1 of the regular board meeting minutes from April 27th, citizens noticed a typo. The word begging on the second to last line should be beginning. So
instead of begging, right?
yeah.
Okay, is everybody all right with the changes on the April 29th minutes?
I wasn't clear. Did John get that request from Ms. McGuire? Is he able to add those emails?
Yeah, upon approval of the board, the emails would be attachments to the minutes.
All right, any comments regarding the payment of bills of $499,341.93? Is there a motion on the consent agenda?
I'd just like to throw in there that the based on resolution 2020-07, so that was on the regular meeting on the 13th of April, that it consolidated multiple township funds. So board members will note some significant differences between the 2019 fund summary report and the 2020 fund summary report. The 2019 fund summary report accounts for audit adjustments provided by the audit team and then entered into the township's financial software based on the 2019 draft financial statement sent to the township board. The 2019 ending fund balances become the 2020 beginning fund balance, and board members will note that funds 248, 252, 283, 508, and 510 have been removed from the 2020 fund summary report because these funds were closed out retroactively back to December 31st, 2019. So we still need to make some modifications to the accounting software to establish the drug forfeiture fund is Fund 265. That was also in that same resolution. And in addition, the township will need to adjust 2020 appropriations to account for expenditures from the former DDA funds 248 and 252. And you will see proposals for how to fix those expenditures getting booked. That'll be at a future meeting, and it'll be a topic for discussion after the 2019 financials have been presented to the township board.
Okay. Any comments or a motion on the consent agenda?
I had a couple of other questions on the check disbursement reports. As Mr. Schaefer indicated, funds 248 and 252 don't exist anymore. But according to this disbursement, checks were written as late as April 13th with Fund 248. The other point is that we discussed numerous times when funds 248 and 252 were in place, and there were monies in each of those accounts, that these types of expenditures, primarily utilities, should come out of Fund 252, because those are basically the only things that could come out of there. So even though Fund 248 doesn't exist, I don't know why they would have been credited to 248 as late as April. The other question I have is on the other check disbursement, which is under Fund 590, the sewer. It has a depreciation expense of $83,000. Depreciation is typically a accounting term. It isn't something you actually write a check for. So I was a little curious about that disbursement.
This is a lead acid battery. They vent out storage bin up.
Can we all, did things freeze up?
Nope, I'm here.
Okay.
No, we're all here.
Did
Yep.
anyone hear what I just said?
I
I
did,
did.
and I think Dave could address those questions.
For the check disbursement report,
As far as like coding them, you changed the coding from 252 to 248 some time ago. And so that's where we've been coding it. And nobody has given me any other, like, I don't think we've created anything in general fund. John, I don't know, maybe you could answer that question for a 101, 248 for an expense.
What I can go back, I'll put together, I don't know if it was 16 or 1700 bucks we appropriated for Fund 252 associated with the utilities. I can send that out, do a little research on that. Pretty sure the 590 is a question is a bond issue.
Yeah,
that's a
the
debt
bond
payment.
Yep. And that's where it's been historically coded to. Nobody has given me any directive to code it anywhere else.
But that doesn't seem like that should be described as a depreciation expense. It should be a principal payment or something like that. Depreciation is typically something you write a check for.
I'll look at it and get back to you.
Well, it's going to bug you.
Well, not really to get back to me. I'm just saying depreciation isn't something you would. That's an accounting term. It's not something you would write a check for. It's just should be labeled as something different, like a principal payment or something of that nature.
I'll get with John because he takes care of the general ledger.
Yep, I can check. I mean, it's the account number isn't going to change. It may just be the description of it.
Yeah, that's the only point I'm making, is just the description of what the payment is for. And when you say it's a payment for depreciation, that isn't typically anything that exists.
I understand. Yeah, like I said, I'll check it out.
Okay.
I don't know why it was created that way, but I'll see if I can figure out why or what we need to do if we need to change it.
All right, thank you.
And John, do you know if we've created numbers in the general ledger for the 248 and 252 to go to the common checking?
No, I don't know that we're going to be creating a department. I guess my understanding maybe has to get a little bit more clear, and I can do that by talking with the auditors or Mr. Schaefer or you, but I don't know that we'll be creating a department within 101. I wouldn't envision creating a department within 101 for the dissolved DDA.
Actually, I thought we were going to discuss that at the exit interview. So, and to answer your other question, Bill, 248 and 252 have been coded to those numbers because we don't have another number to code it to. Even though it does get posted back to January 1st, those adjustments will be made by John in the general ledger after we have our exit interview with the auditors. There was nowhere else to post them at this point. We had to post them to 248 and 252.
Yeah, but those funds were closed as of the end of December of 2019.
Correct, but talking with Cindy, she was going to go through the closure with us and the refunding of the different money and what we have to do. And those, we haven't had our exit interview to be able to go through that process with her yet.
And I think those funds were closed formally by resolution, that resolution 2020-7 that Mr. Schaefer referenced, that was passed by the board not too long ago.
Yeah, I think that's correct. I was under the impression that those funds would be put into the Lakefront District fund. I could be wrong.
Yeah, so the residual balances for Fund 252 got folded into the general fund, and then the residual funds for 248, which is the DDA fund, approximately half gets folded into the general fund, and approximately half will get dispersed back to the taxing entities. And so that will be part of the the 2020 appropriations adjustments, and we're going to have to work with the audit team. We have a preliminary audit work paper that kind of details those reimbursements.
All right, that was all the questions I had. Thank you.
Okay. Any other comments or motion on the consent agenda?
Yeah, this doesn't deal with the consent agenda, but Aaron, just a suggestion, and you can ignore it if you want, but at the beginning of this meeting, it talked about 21 people being on the line, most of whom are muted. Would it be proper for you or someone to indicate that in the last meeting by a split vote that we decided to only have one public comment, and there will be one, but it's at the end? Or have I said it all already? Because there might be people out there wondering what happened to public comment at the beginning of the meeting. Anybody agree with me, or am I way out in left field?
No, that's fine. I can mention that. Sorry, doing quite a bit of crowd control here because there's a lot of people coming in and out of this meeting.
Okay.
Okay, consent agenda. Anybody?
I'll move to approve the consent agenda as presented.
Is that with modification for the special meeting minutes?
Yeah, I'm sorry, with the modification of the meeting minutes.
And support.
Motion by Mr. Palmer, support by Mr. Cummings. Roll call.
Mr. Galeski,
Yes.
Ms. McGuire,
Yes.
Mr. Cummings,
Yes.
Mr. Nardine, yes. Mr. Byer,
Yes.
Mr. Palmer,
Yes.
Mr. Weed.
Yes, motion's passed. All right, subcommittee reports, project updates. Engineering report from Roe.
Good evening, everybody. Everybody hear me okay?
Yeah.
Yes.
Okay, I'll breeze through this pretty quickly because there's a few items later on in the agenda that kind of spin off from this. Phase 2 water main update. Project is going well. Contractor is moving along at pretty good speed. He's had a little bit of conflicts with AT&T out there, but I think as of the other day, those conflicts have been moved out of the way, and he is essentially halfway, or probably actually a little bit beyond halfway with the main line being in. He's to a point on the smaller legs of Interlake and Woodland. He's getting to a point where in some of his downtime elsewhere, he's actually getting in there, I think, and doing some of the restoration. And the bore under the railroad, as of last I heard, was scheduled for tomorrow, I believe. So that will get that in preparation for connection to the main at Cedar Lake. So moving along very well. Contractor was on, or the project manager was on site end of last week, and through the management of Elmer's, they're going to push and try to have this wrapped up by June 19th in that vicinity, as long as everything continues to move along well. So obviously we're monitoring that, making sure that he doesn't rush through anything and all of that. We're coordinating. John Wilson out there is coordinating with Doug Moen, making sure everything is to Doug's acceptance level, so we don't have any issues similar to phase one. Everything is going in well, so that's moving along. To date, we have approximately been contacted by 21 of the residents out there, and that have spoke of some interest in what the next steps would be for them to hook up to the main. We've talked through them with that process, and based on this contractor's revised schedule, we will be probably reaching out to the plumber that he had originally on his contract, and then Goyette, who worked on it back on phase one near the end of this month, to see about their interest in working with these property owners and possibly giving them a discount for those service installations. And once we have that initial information, we'll obviously come back to the board and then make that, based on board acceptance approval, then we would make that information available to the residents so that they then would set up with the individual plumbers to get that work completed. But so far I've had positive response from the residents. Nobody's been difficult as far as working with and all that stuff, and everything seems to be going well. So, as Mr. Weed said, in addition to the agenda a little bit later on is a resolution of the small leg of water main along Woodland that is beyond the jurisdiction of Iosco County Road Commission as far as getting easement for that to install that water main. So that'll come up a little bit later. Current funding opportunities. We have not been received formal notification on this, but apparently the township was not successful in the CBDG IR grant. Those communities that have until May 19th to respond back to MEDC as far as a letter of interest. Based on that, then we would be in the queue for funding in that program possibly for next year. If for some reason a number of communities or funding, is not gathered up under those letters of interest, it is possible that funding could come back to the township yet this year, but we're not sitting back waiting on that. So what we're doing is we're moving forward with, and again, this is also on a later agenda item, recommending to move forward with an ECWAG grant, and then also the final steps of the Drinking Water Revolving Fund grant or application for the water, and the State Revolving Fund Clean Water for the sanitary sewer. And there's the advertisement that was added to the agenda. So we can discuss more at that time, or if you have any questions on it, I can do it now. Moving along, under the sanitary sewer system improvements, kind of tied to that State Revolving Fund and the SAW project from a couple years ago. We've listed the projects out. Part of the funding application to make sure that if the township is successful, that the engineering costs are included in your funding. I mentioned at the last meeting, I tabled the proposal that we had out there. Later on in the agenda is a statement of qualifications that the township should advertise for to solicit qualifications to select an engineer for that work so that it meets Eagle's criteria and allows you to incorporate that into the funding, so you're not paying that out of your fund balances. So that's that. Phase one water main. We have talked to Whispering Woods We have the property owners' names and addresses to contact for 4287 and 4311 Bissonnet. Also later in the agenda, I believe, is the recommendation to enter into a change order with John Henry Incorporated to include those properties to have water hookups. Old Orchard Campground public dock erosion. The soil borings have been completed. Survey is complete. Design is underway. And as now that we're getting into the design, we'll obviously be coordinating closer with the park personnel, Consumers Energy, and Eagle as the preliminary design of that starts to get formulated. And our goal is still to have final plans ready to move on to advertising and construction in June. The electrical upgrades are essentially complete. There's some final punch list items. The biggest one is that the trench needs to be filled in so that the final inspection can be conducted. The consumer's connection has been complete since I submitted this report last week for tonight's meeting. So based on that final inspection passing, which shouldn't be a problem, we should be able to energize these outlets. And when the campground opens up this year, you'll have 36 lots that are capable of handling the larger units. Phase 3 trail project, as I mentioned last month, we got Iosco County Road Commission and MDOT approval on the new alignment down by Foot Village, which essentially the trail will cross over just before you get to Desi's. It'll run along the shoulder on the south side of River Road to across from the dam store. And then this phase will terminate there. And then we just received within the last day confirmation from the TAP application group that all of the criteria has been met for the TAP application to move forward with resolution of that application sometime in July. And then we will know more direction at that time on whether the application will move forward with the with the township's funding, local share in place, as was last presented, for possible construction in 2021 if the money is secured. So that's basically all of the active projects. I won't go over the projects that are on hold unless there's some specific questions on it. So for right now, until the other parts of the agenda, that's my report. Anybody have any questions, concerns?
I got one on Loud Drive.
Yes.
They ran into any high water levels out there putting the main line in?
Actually not. They've been able to punch through it pretty quickly, and the way their operation has been set up, they don't leave the excavation open very long before they start backfilling. So if there's no groundwater essentially encountered, if the hole is left open for any period of time, it might start seeping in, but they basically get the pipe in the ground and backfilled before they ran into any problems.
Good.
So they haven't had to have really any dewatering apparatus in place to construct it so far.
It's good news.
Yeah, they're doing a really good job. They're pushing through and being very professional and meeting all the plans and specs.
I know I've been out there about every other day watching the progress, and they're doing a good job.
I had a
Rick,
question. Rick, on the
Yeah.
third page of your report, it talks about the plat right-of-way issues in special assessment district. Is that for south of town, or is that someplace else?
No, that was that one that was, and help me out with that, Dave. It was the one over there. Where the right of way, where the easement was encroached on by some property. It was in that area, sorting that out as far as what was available for any potential future sanitary sewer work.
John, you remember that street?
Elk Lane.
Elk Lane, that's it.
Yeah, Rick, I had a question. We got an email from you just the other day about the Phase 3 bike path project and the concern of MDOT now with the SHPO, the Historic Preservation.
Oh, SHPO?
SHPO, yeah, they're in Footsite Village on the south side.
Yes.
How much of we went through that. I know we went through that before. You folks did that study and had that done. Is that something we have to do over again, or how much of a problem is that?
What it is SHPO is going through some reorganization. The actual state historic preservation officer, Brian Conway, retired at the end of last year, I believe, and they had not assigned a new state historic preservation officer. And then SHPO got relocated and placed under MEDC. And the concern is with everything that's going on with the virus and MEDC focusing primarily on the small businesses and economic concerns and all of that stuff, that there could be some delays in finalizing the SHPO process, which is required once we get to the MDOT letting stage. So that's what they're concerned about, just making sure that we've addressed everything up to this point that we can, which we believe we have. And we have sent out an email to them just to confirm that. And then there will be a final step in the process, which is the NEPA process, which SHPO is part of, and the archaeological that's out there and all of that stuff. And we have Commonwealth identified to help us get through that process once we get to the advertising and letting phase.
Yeah, well, in the email, it relates back to the TAP application, which was reviewed April 29th. In the language in here, I didn't know what this meant. It said the State Historic Preservation Office is requiring an above ground cultural resource survey. I don't know what that means. Is that something we've already done or something that'll have to be done?
Yes, we've done the preliminary of it, and what's in front of them now is they need to then evaluate what we've identified as potential or non-issues. They have to sign off on that. They might come back and say we need to do a little bit more investigation on a particular property, or if there's a archaeological site that they're concerned with. And if so, like I said, we have Commonwealth on board and ready to take care of that once we get some feedback from them. But we won't get that until the final stages of the MDOT process.
Okay, because I see in here it said the application date for this application is around July 22nd. So I know sometimes these things take quite a bit of time, especially with this COVID thing. I don't know how that's working, but that was, I didn't understand what the cultural resources survey would be if that's already been done by you. You say you've already done that, so.
Yeah, what that is an evaluation of all of the above ground buildings, structures, any other features that might be either already on a historic register, which we found none, and two, if it is deemed potentially to be historic based on the date of the construction, the type of construction, and all that stuff. So again, we've went through all of that, documented it to them. now we're just waiting for their agreement that there are no issues, or if they need to see a little bit further investigation. And like I said, until they get, like I said, we're checking with them frequently to make sure where they're at on it. And it shouldn't be, if they come back with something, it shouldn't be a long drawn out process.
All right, very good.
Do we have any idea why the CBDGIR wasn't successful, or what we might do that?
Not yet. Like I said, because it's not official yet, with that May 19th date for the ones that they did select.
Okay.
To respond. Dave and I actually talked about this last week when I was up on site. It could even be, again, we don't know, it could be even some of the money that was earmarked for it might have been redirected due to the situation we're in, because it is through MEDC. So we will investigate that, obviously, to find out where we were short on the application, or what improvements we can make sure that we get full consideration for the next round.
Great, thank you.
Any
Okay.
other questions?
Nope,
Yeah,
thank-
Going
go
back to
ahead.
the special assessment district on Elk Lane, what information did you provide to the township? I don't have that in the board packet.
We provided that back to Dave, and I think it was Mr. Eppert back. Oh, I'm not sure exactly when. It was it was sometime in mid 2019. And
Okay.
What we gave him was basically what the special assessment process would entail, and the fact that, what the steps would be to further investigate it on behalf of the township, and the projected cost of that. We didn't resolve anything or find out any answers. It was just basically giving Dave and the township what the next steps would be if the township decided to go that route.
Okay, yeah, I do remember that conversation, because the
Yes.
board said we had enough information on that and we were just gonna move on. I was just wondering why it was on your April to May 2020 progress report, that's all.
Just that it's out there and on hold. That's
Okay,
all. Yep.
thank you.
Mhm. Any other questions? Oh.
No.
And as I said, I'll be available in the other parts of the agenda when any of those issues come up, if anybody's got specific questions.
Okay, update from the EIC, Todd Dickerson.
He's muted.
Good evening, everybody. Aaron, I wasn't sure if you were going to unmute me or if I needed to, so.
Nah, it seems to be a little slow in the muting and unmuting right now.
Gotcha. Okay. Well, again, good evening. I'm going to start off my communication board with the dashboard report. As I'm talking through a few of the highlights here, know that I'll be comparing this month's report in progress to the dashboard I presented on March 10th. So in our Place Leap task and strategies, I'm happy to say that we've been able to move our completed task from 11% to 20%, which is nearly doubling that factor. And we were able to significantly shift our not started activities into the in process for a net gain of 18%. So we've got half of our activities are now in an active or in process state. So I think that's gaining good ground in that area. The Place Leap downtown strategies report that it's a little slower progress. We still have a significant number of tasks that are not started. And the note that the primary reason for that is a lot of those tasks involve getting public comment, public feedback, small business interface, comment and commentary. We had our 2020 Downtown Summit planned for the end of March. And of course, the pandemic and stay-at-home orders sort of forced us to cancel that. When we meet, when the EIC meets here coming up in the month of May, we're going to discuss kind of how we regroup. I don't expect that we're going to be able to meet in large groups anytime soon, but we've got to get through this portion of it to make better progress on the downtown strategies. I didn't note it in the notes, but that downtown summit, or getting that interface with the businesses, accounts for about 30% of our total ability to make progress. There's 15 tasks that kind of jumpstart from getting those folks assembled and having those discussions. So we'll get back on track, but that's really the cause for what is slower progress in the downtown strategies. Other good news, though, in the RRC bucket, we've been able to increase our not started activities into the active bucket for a net gain of 27%. So now we are a total of active and ready for approval. We've got a total of 54% of our activities are in that, and only 16% left to get started. I'm going to report here in a few minutes on our CDAM fellow progress, but once we get this person up and running, I expect us to significantly accelerate through this process. And Dave knows that I have a lofty and aggressive goal of getting our community certified by year end. So I'll challenge myself to accomplish that for all of us. And then in the projects recap, as I mentioned here, sort of surprised that we haven't maybe lost more projects, people simply canceling them or moving on with their plans and doing something else. But I'm reporting a net gain of 2 projects. We have 17 total. They're kind of equally dispersed amongst the 4 categories that I'm tracking. I kind of thought, as right before the pandemic hit, we had a couple of, I think, seriously interested parties, and I was expecting some offers on some of the some property we had available. But that pandemic, well, I wouldn't say they're canceled projects, certainly has just simply slowed or put on hold their plans to make any or take any official action. So I'd still say overall positive news in the projects arena, especially considering what we're going through with within the state of Michigan. Before I move into the overall activity summary, does anybody have any questions about the dashboard update?
Yeah, could you describe, like, under the projects section, what type of projects might those be? I don't need any specifics, but just generally, what might be an example?
So, well, I've got them broke out. Obviously, you can see they're industrial, retail, residential, and then commercial. Under, let's say, residential, for instance, we have a couple of parties that are looking at multifamily projects.
Okay.
And there's probably 2 or 3 that are multifamily, and then I've got one that I've cataloged as a potential for a not multifamily, but single family home development.
Okay.
Industrial, just general manufacturing type. One of those is new, and 3 of those projects would be expansion. And remember, I'm counting the spaceport as one of those industrial projects. Retail is kind of, it's a combination of traditional retail or restaurant type projects. And commercial is kind of where I'm putting, let's see, I have to make sure I got that right. Yeah, commercial is you know, anything that's not traditional retail, so like a hotel, I would consider commercial. Office space, I would consider commercial. You know, we have off and on conversation with folks who might be interested in the old school building. I consider that a commercial type project.
Okay, great. Thank you. I appreciate that.
Yep.
Todd, how is the Brownsfield Authority thing working out?
I'm sorry, ask that again, Jamie?
Brownsfield Authority, are we pursuing any type of granting through them? Is there anything available through them as far as like for the old high school?
Well, I think, you know, as we talk to potential users for that school, I think there are or will be monies that we could leverage for that, but we haven't quite gotten far enough along with an interested party to, you know, kind of bring in the MEDC, bring in the Brownfield folks and have kind of the next level conversation. So I anticipate that's certainly a strategy we're going to want to go through with, but we're not quite there yet. I was just having a conversation with someone who's interested in the old school building that's, you know, owned by the hardware store there. And we're just kind of in preliminary discussions right now. So until we can firm some things up, until the two parties could get together on a potential acquisition, you know, it's tough to take it right to the Brownfield folks right now. But I think it's going to be an opportunity for us to leverage.
Thank you.
Okay, so other just general summary of activities here. I've been, as I reported last month, pretty involved in the NEMCOG group. So that's the Northeastern Michigan Council of Governments. In March, we were pretty involved in the MEDC Grant and Relief Program. And just as a refresher, remember that we were able to bring $49,000 worth of grant money to Iosco County. And from that, we were able to support 9 businesses here in Oscoda Township with a grant value of $19,900. And also have been very involved with the MCOG organization. We happen to be geographically kind of split between NEMCOG and MCOG. NEMCOG is where our MEDC partners tend to be out of in our region. And MCOG is important to us for the SEDS strategy and any grants we would pursue through the EDA. So, you know, both organizations are important, and our involvement in those organizations are really to build those relationships with these granting partners through MEDC, EDA, and then, you know, anywhere else that we think we're going to be able to find grant monies. So that's really the motivation, and then the reasons why we're spending the kind of time we are with those organizations. The CDAM fellow, for the last 3 weeks or so, I've been very immersed in that process. And we've come, boy, I think we had 40 some applications in total, of which I did a first round of phone screens, and then our EIC team did a total of 4 first round video meetings, interviews, if you will, and then we brought 4 back for a second round. I believe we have settled in on a finalist. We like 2 of the folks of the 4 really well, and hope that we can have this nailed down by the end of this week, but by the end of next week for sure, where we can make an official announcement on our selection. Pre-stay at home, we were accepting RFPs for real estate brokerage services. We did receive 1 that was within the deadline. We received 1 proposal after that deadline. Unfortunately, the stay-at-home orders fell upon us before we were able to have our March EIC meeting. And since March and April were both suspended, I have not been able to take those proposals to the EIC, and so I don't have any recommendations or any feedback for you at this time. We'll be meeting here in a couple of weeks, and that will be on our agenda, so we can come back to the board in June and offer feedback and recommendations to you at that time. Probably the thing that's been most negatively impacted by the stay-at-home orders is the digital marketing effort. It requires them to obviously be in our community to get the drone footage, which drives the videos that we would create, still shots that we'll recreate for our real estate marketing efforts, as well as our microsite for the economic development website. So while we can be thinking a lot about it, they have put some framework around that site. We really can't get to the meats and potatoes of this until they can get on the ground. The governor has lifted the stay-at-home for construction and real estate services. So I have them tentatively scheduled to be in our market on May 19th, weather permitting, so that we can get that rolling, and I'm confident we'll be able to play catch up and show some very positive results in the coming weeks after that. And then the last thing I'll mention is just the BR&E, so business retention and expansion effort. That is one of the key PlaySleep strategies that we have, and I am happy to report that I've been able to at least reach out to 100% of our targeted businesses in Oscoda Township. There are a few folks outside of our township that I still think are important, but I've prioritized our own township businesses first. And that outreach has resulted in, basically meetings with 2/3 of those companies. So we're starting to build relationships with our industrial and manufacturing type companies here in the township. And that is my report. Any questions regarding that information?
All right. Well, thank you very much for that, Todd.
You're welcome.
All right. Then the Township Hall phone system upgrade.
Hi, everybody. So the upgrade project is actually completed now, and the police department converted over to the phone system that was put up online back in April, a few weeks ago. And so now all phones at Township Hall have been converted over. We experienced a few challenges along the way, things which were really annoying, quite frankly. Charter had made some mistakes during the porting, and that created some challenges for a number of us in the police department. So those have all been completed now. We're past that, and at least as of today, I believe everything is working as it should. There's maybe a couple small things which I think are outstanding, and I think they really truly are minor. They have nothing to do with phone functionality. They have to do with a feature that's on a phone, that whether or not it shows local weather, which frankly most of the offices have Windows, so the local weather thing wasn't anything we're paying for. Just a feature that changes the color of the display and gives you some information. But other than that, the phones are working, and I expect with the instructions that were provided last week to the staff on how to set up their voicemail and set their passwords and all that, that as we start to prepare for returning to reopening Township Hall, this will need to be one of the first steps that the people coming back to the offices for the first time are going to need to do. And then the automated attendance will be activated, and we'll have a fully functioning phone system at that point.
The security system is still not working.
Yeah, what is that security system, Jamie? because I thought, I understand from Mark David when he responded to you that that is not something that's, or that that his is working, and why wouldn't yours be? So how long has it not been working?
About almost a month and a half.
Well, that was before the porting of any phones. Did you call the vendor at that point and get them to evaluate whether the
First of all,
issue was on their end?
Mark David didn't respond to me. He
did. I don't know whether he responded to you, but I saw an email that said that they did respond on that topic. So I thought he did respond to you. I thought you were on that thread.
And they said that they were all tied together from back there in the police department. So
yeah, theirs is working perfectly, he said this morning again. And Aaron, did you have any other information from Mark David? Regarding the security system? Aaron?
Sorry, I was on mute. Mark David had said that the security system is working. He doesn't know why he's throwing that error code, so he's in contact with the security company to figure that out.
Yeah, there was no porting going on a month and a half ago, so I don't know why that wasn't called in prior to all this actual work that took place. The phones actually, the security system, according to Mark David, uses a phone line, and that phone line's still there. And I don't know what else to say on that one.
Yeah,
Jim,
so go ahead.
Go ahead.
Go ahead, sure.
I was going to say, as soon as Mark David hears back from the security company, then we'll know.
Okay.
Jim, I've been a little bit bothered that the phone system turnover has taken so long, and it's on our agenda every meeting. So I called 911 in Tawas today and said, can you communicate with the police? And she said, no. The phones are not working to the Oscoda Township Police. And I said, because I'm Jim Lotek here, I said, well, if there's an emergency, how do you get to them? Oh, we have a radio system, that we can get to them. But telephones, I said, you can't transfer me to the Oscoda Police right now? And she said, no, because they're closed because of the virus, but it doesn't work anyway, at least this afternoon. That's pretty fresh information. Then I talked to Mark, and I talked to Mark David after that, and he said the police phones went out twice today. 2 times today. He's amazingly patient. I congratulated him on this. Said he's a little frustrated, but it's been in and out all day long today.
That's interesting, because I've received factually no email and no phone calls from them about that. Now, granted, I'm not the person who is delivering the service to you or the township. I'm merely the guy who's put in quite a number of hours for free to help coordinate this on behalf of the vendor. I don't have a support log in front of me to tell you what calls came from the township or the police department that they would have fielded from anyone calling in. I don't know. I was under the impression that it was going fine, because I did have an email from Mark David this morning thanking us for what we have done. So, yeah, not sure about that. Now, back to your first question, why would you be concerned that this topic has been on so many agendas?
It just seems to be taking forever. I'm possibly wrong here, and I really want you to correct me if I am. The township hall is closed. Do the telephone people have access to the building, at least if somebody is there with some authority, Dave or somebody?
Well, they haven't needed it.
They've never needed that, because I
didn't say never.
Ever to complete a project.
Jim, I never said never. I just said they haven't needed it, as in since the project's completed. We did the porting last Wednesday. We were on site and I was with them. And then 3 weeks prior, we did the Township Hall porting, and I was again on site, and they were on site to do the phone placements and get everything hooked up. Certainly before that, there was recabling going on. There's been Wi-Fi access installed. There's been connecting Wi-Fi, I should say, beaming an internet connection down to the bathhouse at Oscoda Beach Park, replacing the internet connection that we have down there. So we have actually had a lot of action items on this project, which is why this has taken some months as it has.
Yeah, we're talking a complete overhaul of both, not just the telephone system, but also the internet system. I mean, basically, it's a thing, you'd think of it as stripping out every old thing in there and then putting in all new stuff. So definitely not a quick turnaround process. In addition to that, I received an email not too long ago today that the problem with the phone connectivity between 911 and the police department had been resolved. And it was a problem, a situation that had to be fixed over in the 911 building in their phone system.
I see.
And they did have other means of calling. They do have a cell phone in that office that they can call the police department office if they needed to. And they have done it because they did it last week as we did a test run for some other phone, the phone connection.
The only alternative here that she gave me was radio contact, radio.
No, because I watched them do it last Friday.
Yeah. Well, I mean, this, maybe my information is wrong, but it's certainly fresh because it was like 3:30 or 4 o'clock this afternoon. 2 phone calls, one to 911 and saying, can you get through to the Oscoda police? And she said no. And she thought I had an emergency or something. I said, no, I'm a member of the township board. And this phone system thing is on our agenda like every meeting. And I'm just wondering from your end, how's it going? Well, like, we can't get through to the Oscoda police, she said. And then secondly, after that, I contacted Mark and he indicated that the phone's connections had gone out twice today. He did say that the new phone system is connected to the internet, and if the internet goes out, then so does the phone system.
Well, but that's his understanding, Jim, which is incomplete, just as you're parroting it. We actually have a secondary internet circuit that is installed at Township Hall. We're not paying for that. That is something being provided by the vendor. We're paying only for the first one, but the second one that is installed will actually provide us the fault tolerance that you would want for anywhere. But honestly, most township halls, even their police departments, do not have dual internet fiber connections like that. Not fiber anyway, because the circuits cost simply too much money for one, let alone for two. It's like so that's simply the way that is. So we will have that, and that second circuit coming up and being configured has been delayed by this virus problem. They had the implementation of the equipment some months ago, but they haven't been able to bring the circuit up. I think it's something through whoever the provider is of that internet circuit. I'm not sure who it is. If it's AT&T or somebody else. But
I have one last question
until then,
regarding all of this. Go ahead.
Okay, sure. Yeah. Oh, no. But until then, we still have the first one, and the internet has not gone out for us. So we haven't had an internet problem.
On this phone project, are we paying for a project cost, or are we paying them hourly for the time that they put in doing this?
Well, the paperwork that you've been presented at each of the meetings, whenever we've talked about the budget, has been flat cost. There's been no hourly rate.
Okay. All right. Okay. Just a little concerned. I mean, it just sounds like the, public's access to the police department is a little fragile, and hopefully we can fix that.
Public's access to the police
Yeah.
department isn't, because while I've been in the police department, the public has called in. So that's
Well,
all
I
been
understand
fine.
it works. I know it works sometimes, but I mean, this is right from the chief. Went out twice today, and then 911 in Baldwin Center says, no, we can't talk to them half the day today. So that's all I know.
But
I'm not
we've
making
also
this
addressed those questions. No, you're not making it up, but we've answered the questions. You're still holding on to the original statements.
Yeah. Okay.
Anything else?
All right. Then an update on the MLI.
All right, so your packet contains a letter from Michigan Aerospace Manufacturers Association dated May 6, 2020, addressed to the Oscoda Wurtsmith Airport Manager concerning the Michigan Launch Initiative and Spaceport development. Board members will note that the virus delayed the project by 2 months. You'll see in there that the BRPH has been engaged to assess horizontal launch specifically in Oscoda. The final feasibility study for horizontal launch at Oscoda Wurtsmith is projected to be submitted to the MEDC by the end of June, and that spaceport development at Oscoda Wurtsmith will be a focus area for the North American Space Summit, being held Monday, August 31st through Wednesday, September 2nd at the Grand Traverse Resort in Traverse City. So Todd and myself, we've been engaged with the airport manager and Mama and the MEDC and the EDA, all to over the last few weeks associated with this project. And we did get this this letter last week. I wanted to include it in the board packet so the township board understands the most recent communication from Mama.
Okay, anybody have anything else? All right, then on to the supervisor's report. First thing we have up here is township virus precautions and plan for opening. After our last special meeting, the governor has put out some new executive orders and shown some details on her phased-in opening plan. So I have made some changes to the previous plan. Based on that, of course, I gave example dates in here because the dates from Capitol seem to be changing quite frequently, where some things were thought to be May 15th, and they're May 28th. I'm hearing June 22nd, so I don't, there's just no way to predict how this is going to go from the state. Anybody have any comments regarding the 11 May plan?
Under the boat launch fees, because we are pushing out into the boating season, I know that we waived the fees for the launches. I've had quite a few people contact me about seasonal boat launch passes, and I would like to get the board's input or get some direction from the board on how to answer them on what we want to do as far as the seasonal boat launches. They can mail in a request to get them, drop it off in the drop box, and we can mail it to them like we have in the past. The only thing is that they just can't come in and get it over the counter at this point. The seasonal launch is $35, which equates to 7 visits basically, and it's worth your money to purchase the seasonal boat launch. So I didn't know if we wanted to address that now, or if I should be issuing some, or telling people to wait, but then I don't want it to cost them more money if they do that type of thing. or if we
People can-
wanted to waive it for the whole year, or what we were doing.
People can get, you said they can get them via mail with your office. They can get them at the launch as well, correct?
I think they have the launch things taped off right now, but they could do that. They could get them at the launch because the launches are in. If we put the envelopes out there, and if they wanted a seasonal boat launch, they could do it like we have in the past.
Yeah,
My
but
view
you
is,
don't have the stickers out there.
No, what happens is they turn that in and they put it in the Dropbox thingy out there at the launch. And then the DPW checks that a couple times a week and they bring it into us and we process it and still mail it to them anyways, unless they come in to get it over the counter, which they can't
So
do.
you'll mail the sticker to them then, Jamie?
Yep. Done it in the past. It works out pretty well.
and they can use the tear off part of the envelope as a temporary, correct?
Correct.
Until they get
Okay.
the sticker.
Yep.
Yeah, my view is if people are interested in, I mean, given all the uncertainty, but if people are still interested in getting a seasonal launch pass, that we should be open to providing them, especially in keeping with the governor's direction about, making recreation available and whatnot.
Dave, do we have the new, everything in place for this new ordinance? On the
We
boat
don't-
launches?
Yeah, we don't have, at this point, we can't man the launch attendant due to the orders. So at this point, we don't have anybody, checking the parking or anything like that associated with any kind of violations. And that's why the boat launch fees were waived temporarily, because we don't have somebody monitoring.
Wouldn't somebody be monitoring, be consistent with operating the parks to provide for recreation?
No, because monitoring the parks under the governor's order is about people safely recreating.
Right.
Huh.
Does it
But-
fall
but
more under the
recreating.
DPW's guidelines? Because that's who checks them.
No.
I guess we don't need
so
to
if they're maintaining a park so that people can recreate on them safely, that's one thing. But just to have somebody there for exchanging the funds and all that, one of the things we didn't want to do was just have a lot of cross handling of so many dollar bills and envelopes and such. And so if somebody wants to send money to the township hall to get a seasonal pass and you want to mail that out to them, that's fine. I don't have a problem with that. But as far as them using the envelopes out there and paying for those and having somebody check that box, that just dramatically increases the points of contact.
Okay, I guess I don't understand why it's any different than us checking our Dropbox every day, but that's fine. We can post a sign out there that says that they need to mail in their payment.
I agree with what you just said, but, and I guess it rests with, I'm fine with being able to provide them via email or via the US mail, but I agree with the Dropbox thought.
Well, because you're adding an extra person into it and you're adding in all the people who will then pay the daily fees also while they're out there. So it does change that dynamic.
I've also been working on trying to get it so that they can pay online for their seasonal boat launch. I'm working with Point and Pay and BSNA also. So hopefully they can do that too this summer.
On page 2 of the document here, we talked about this when we first examined the document back on like March 17th, and it under utility billing, but then on the second page, it says normal billing, turning on service, and shutoffs will resume in the next billing period. Those are, it doesn't seem like we should have the turning on service being listed as doing in the next billing period. I feel my proposal would be to strike that language.
Yeah, you're correct about that. So what about normal billing, turn on, service, and shut-offs will continue as normal?
Well, yeah, except for shut-offs aren't continuing, I don't think. I'm good with normal billing because we're still billing.
No, we're
Turn-ons.
still doing shut-offs. We're not doing shut-offs for a lack of payment. But if
Okay.
somebody needs their water
Sure,
shut off,
sure.
either for a maintenance issue or whatever, then we will do that.
Okay, and that makes perfect sense. Maybe even, I don't know how to succinctly, even and parenthetically say, not for lack of payment shut-offs, but making that distinction that shut-offs are still available if you need one, but they're not being used as a penalty or whatever.
Okay.
Under cemetery, Aaron, you and I have exchanged emails today a little bit about that. And I'm okay with them following the state directives as related to the parks and cemeteries, as that's what it's considered for. But we have gone away from the DPW taking payment at the gravesite and I'm not comfortable with that. It's a bad practice for cash handling, and I would like us to stick to what we have done to try to keep the payments in line before the cemetery, before we're burying people. We'd like to have it paid for. I think that the Dropbox or mailing the payment in and using the work order process with Tammy has been working. I mean, we've had our ups and downs with it, with some of the funeral homes providing the payment in the past, and I just don't want it to get lost with all the different things happening with the shutdowns in the town hall and communication and things like that. I think that we shouldn't deviate from that process. We do check the Dropbox every day and the mail daily so that we can notify the correct people when work orders need to be processed for things like that.
I understand what you're saying about that, but since this is kind of a unique situation, I think it's appropriate that they take the payment at the funeral.
I have to disagree, because you just got done saying that that's too many hands touching the money out at the boat launch. How would this be any different?
Because if you look deeper into it, there's also the points of contact associated with the funeral home and the people who come in here who are coming in from out of the area, out of the state, and contending with a funeral and having very limited resources to deal with. If they have to go to a bank to get money or whatever, if they can pay on site, they at least have time to get their money or whatever arranged, so that way when they do arrive here, they can just handle it on the day of the burial without having to go through this weird thing of paying in advance and all that, since things are not the same as they were prior to the COVID thing. And after the COVID thing, if we return back to normal procedure, then everything will be normal.
I disagree. It was a prearranged funeral, already paid ahead. So I don't understand what the problem would be with getting the money to us at the township hall.
When do the funerals usually take place? Aren't they on the weekends?
No, that could be any day during the week.
Okay. But if the situation you're describing, Aaron, is that people are coming in from out of town or out of state, which I could see, then would we necessarily be open to even receive that money?
We're not open to the public, Tim, so they would have to use the Dropbox, which is located right in the back of the parking lot.
They would provide the payment to the DPW worker who's at the burial.
Right, I was just trying to think through what Jamie was saying, trying to understand what the alternative would be if we weren't permitting, if we were going to continue to look at how this wasn't going to work. we weren't going to accept this exception, that we were going to, look for them to try to prepay. Then I was trying to figure out, okay, well, how would they be able to do that if, things are complicated, as most funerals can be. So I don't know. I was just trying to figure that out.
Yeah, and to sit here and decide, well, the funeral home's paying for this one, or the person's paying for that one, or I don't know, trying to turn this into some big convoluted thing. Just a better process right now. They just pay at the burial, and it's streamlined and makes it not a problem for however the funeral home needs to arrange these kinds of things, or the people who are family members of the deceased and have to deal with the financing of it. We had a guy come in a few months ago, right after this whole COVID thing happened, and he wanted to pay by credit card, and he couldn't pay by credit card, so he had to go hunt down a bank that would give him money, but he's not from the area. He eventually got it worked out, but I think we need to make the process simple enough. I mean, it's already a bad enough situation as it is with COVID topped on top of that.
Yeah, I think it's not too big a deviation just to stop to be at the drop box, which is in close proximity to the cemetery for the day of the funeral. And then by using the drop box, it limits the exchange of cash or check or whatever between the DPW person and the people at the funeral, which I think they're trying to limit. Was my understanding, we were trying to limit their interaction, where like DPW would dig the grave and then vacate to a large extent, or at least distance from a long distance. They'd have the funeral and then DPW would come in later. So if we can use the drop box, we can prevent them interacting at all. Again, similar to the boat launch thing that was just explained to us.
How much money are we talking about here, Jamie?
It's an open and close for a resident, and it depends on if they're cremated or if it's a full burial. Full burial is $400, and I believe the cremation open and close is $150.
And they're going to pay this before we put them in the ground?
Everybody is supposed to pay ahead of time because we were having problems with collecting after the people were buried.
Well, are we still going to have that problem by putting in a drop box?
No, I check that every day. So if they're going to have the funeral
You missed my point, Jamie. You missed my point. Are them people going to pay before we put them in the ground?
That's a great question.
That's what I'm getting at. And if the DPW can take it with the situation it is at hand, we're not going to be out any money, or we might be stuck with some. I hate to say that because of the situations.
No, the work order doesn't go out to open the hole until we're paid. That's the process.
Well, that's not just what you said.
Yeah, well, they pay. If I check the drop box Thursday morning.
A work order is one thing, and the grave's open. They better be paid in full, or we don't put them in the ground. I just don't understand what the big hullabaloo is here, I guess.
Our process has been to have it paid before we dig the hole.
And what we're underneath right now is not our normal process.
You're correct, but it's not the DPW's job to collect the money.
Granted.
And are you sure they're okay with handling somebody else's money, just like was explained from the boat launch? I'll go up there and collect it. That's not a problem.
2 people here and 3 people before. So we are eliminating 1 person. But I guess I don't understand, in the situation we're at, why don't we make it so much easier for everybody at hand? That's my thoughts.
Yep.
Any other comments regarding these procedures?
Yeah, for the zoning, since the recent executive orders open up or allow construction starting May 7th, I believe, how do we envision that impacting the zoning office and our interaction with people doing construction projects?
The zoning administrator will be handling those as they come. So even though like we've encouraged, to let them know that, you're probably, maybe you might want to delay some things here, but we're not going to be a delay for them. So if they need a permit or something handled, our zoning administrator is very responsive to them. And if he needs to come in the office to handle some things with that, he'll do that.
Okay.
One other thought I just had with the cemetery is the fact that we've had where in the past where we've left the payment up to them making it at the gravesite, and we've had people that have not paid. And do you want DPW to have to go up to a grieving family and say, hey, we need your money before we can finish burying your loved one? Which was another one of the reasons why we started doing what we did and making it being paid up front. Same with getting the money from the funeral home. We were making arrangements with the funeral home to bury people. Yep, go ahead, and they were not going through the township. They were going right to Bill. Bill would dig the hole and bury the people, and then yet we had a problem trying to collect the money. I don't want to put that kind of pressure on the DPW workers. It is not their responsibility.
Has the cemetery committee met yet?
No.
Who's attended cemetery training?
No, Rosemary has.
Be nice when the cemetery committee can get things going so they can make sure the ordinances and procedures are taken care of.
Aaron, by state statute, the treasurer is required to receive and take charge of all the funds belonging to the township. That doesn't have anything to do with the cemetery committee.
I don't see how it doesn't.
The money doesn't have anything to do with the cemetery committee.
Part of the ordinances with the cemetery deals with payments. So.
Oh, we don't have a cemetery ordinance, I don't believe.
Right, and so these things need to get resolved in a much better manner, especially in dealing with things like residential rates, non-residential rates. A lot of these disparities and with the money, I don't understand what you're saying with that, Jamie. If you're saying that you're the one who has to take in the money for the cemeteries, and only the treasurer does, nobody else can receipt in any cash and then transfer it to you. Is that right?
They're not receiving the cash in, they're delivering it to me if they would continue. That was the process, but it wasn't working, so we changed it. So I would suggest until the cemetery committee or whoever is appointed to do that, we follow the process that we've been doing to try to negate the problems that we've had in the past.
Okay. And I understand the problems that were in the past. But again, has been stated a few times already, this is a little bit of a different situation that's temporary. I exaggerate by saying it's a little bit of a different situation. It's a lot of different situation.
Again, so when the person doesn't have the money or they're distraught and forget to pay and they don't pay, then what? Why are we putting the DPW in that position? We shouldn't be.
So we'll come back to the cemetery thing. Does anybody have anything else regarding these procedures?
Under Board of Trustee meetings on the page 3, it says regularly scheduled board meetings will continue by means authorized by the state. executive staff will handle all necessary interim decision-making. Can you define, what do you mean by executive staff?
That's treasurer, clerk, supervisor, and superintendent.
Okay.
That's the same one that was in the one that was originally written.
Okay, yeah, it must not have jumped out at me before. The difference between executive, I wasn't executive committee, executive staff being the same thing. That coincides with my understanding, so I appreciate the clarity. And then the very last thing I have is, what's the intention or the purpose of the document?
So that we're all on the same page here for how we're going to operate these things. The board's, if the board's good with this, then, you know, we can operate under these general procedures here until the restrictions are lifted.
Okay.
Does anybody know what Ensemble is doing? When we share the cemetery with them, I don't mean we have to follow them or anything, but just knowledge of what they're doing so we can be a little consistent, maybe.
They're doing the same thing we're doing. They've duplicated the document that we had originally passed, and then on their situation for opening, pretty much everything's the same except for the situation on opening. They will have the township hall fully open on the day that the governor releases restrictions. But they also have a lot less traffic that comes into their township hall.
Yeah, sure.
Jim, I do know that they do have a Zoom meeting scheduled for next Monday, the 18th.
Okay.
And for if we're trying to look at in the context of payment for the cemetery, we collect the payment for the cemetery. It's not something that is parallel with them.
Just seems to me a little awkward. I don't know who I'm agreeing with here or not, but to have to transfer money at the time of burial, just kind of weird. And I guess I agree that DPW people, that's not part of their job, is to accept money from the bereaved family. I don't know what the solution is, guys, but I just think the whole thing is a little awkward. But I understand, and I'm hearing Aaron say, this is temporary. We need a quick fix until things settle down regarding the COVID-19. I understand all these. I don't have any answers, but I just squirm a little bit. And it's not from personal recent deals, because I'm looking at my wife's urn right now. She's not in the ground. And so I haven't had this experience. But I don't know. Paying for it there and paying the DPW for it makes me squirm a little bit.
Well, I talked to Bill Hamlin, and he said that last time it worked perfectly. He didn't have any issues with it.
Oh, well, that's interesting. Yep.
That is interesting, because he also told me that it's really awkward trying to ask somebody that's crying over their loved one to pay. And so they don't. And so then we have to track down the payment.
Okay, so how's the board want to proceed on this?
I'm okay with the precautions because it doesn't address anything about the payments for the cemetery.
I don't think we have consensus about how the payment should be handled. Yeah.
I think that falls under what Aaron was saying about the executive committee being able to determine that. I don't want to see
Determine
the, I don't want to see the precautions get held up just because of that discussion.
I see.
So I have a question, Jamie, just so I'm clear here on what you're talking about. What you're suggesting is that the funeral home or the people involved would put the payment in the drop box before there was an opening in the ground?
Correct. That's what, yep, that's what we've been doing. Mm-hmm.
I know that's how we've handled it in the past. I mean, under normal circumstances,
right,
that's what we would require. But I'm wondering how do we communicate that, since it's been advertised that, you know, Township Hall is closed. People can't come into the Township Hall. How do we get the word out that, you know, they have to pay in advance, and the only way they can do that is to put it in the drop box?
There's actually, when people contact the Township Hall to have an open and close for a grave site, they usually talk to Tammy, and she generates a work order to the DPW for that, and she communicates with the funeral home before the actual funeral happens.
But now she's not in the Township Hall now to take those calls.
But she has email and our phone. We're answering our phones, and they also contact Bill, I believe, as well.
Someone has to contact us in order to set up the funeral in the first place. So at that time we can communicate, or the funeral home. They have to contact the funeral home, who then contacts the township, or someone has to contact the township saying we're interested in a burial. A thought might be that usually the process is we take payment before a hole is dug. Well, and like I think Mr. Weed was making the point that some people are doing this remotely, and it's easier to pay day of. My view would be that we could kind of compromise a bit and say we'll still dig the hole, but you still have to pay before burial in the drop box. So as you're driving to the cemetery for the funeral, you could put the payment in the drop box, and if Jamie's checking it daily or whatever, and if she wants, I mean, she said she'd take the payments. I don't know if she'd check it in real time. You can at least shrink that window of you have to have it paid 2 days in advance. It could still be a lot closer, and then we could still do the drop box, the dead drop type of scenario. Ensure we get the payment, make sure DPW isn't handling cash and in the awkward scenario, and still get payment in advance, but shrink that window.
So burial's on Sunday, family arrives on Saturday. Who's checking the drop box? Or burials at in the afternoon, they come by right before the burial and put it in the drop box. How do we know that they've still paid if it's in the drop box and they were on their way to the cemetery?
Tammy has always contacted me to make sure that payment has been made, and this wouldn't be any different.
So they've got to drop it off in the drop box and notify Tammy that, okay, I made payment. Then Tammy notifies you to be able to go and check the box?
If that's too unrealistic, then I revert back to just
I
normal
just
procedure.
cannot believe how much discussion we've had over this subject here, considering the circumstances of everything's going on.
Yeah, well, I tend to agree, but it's been the same for a lot. And I mean, I wish we didn't have these long meetings with protracted discussion, but we can't seem to agree or see each other's ways of thinking. So
right, then so maybe we should just stick to the procedure that we have in place.
Okay, cemetery fees aside, anything else regarding this document?
I've asked all my questions, and the only change that I had suggested was the one about the turn on service for the water. So no, I'm satisfied.
Seems good to me. Given that things will probably change in another week or two, we'll be reassessing the whole thing again.
So far, the governor's been putting out guidance on Thursdays and Fridays is tend to be when we get formal executive orders signed. So that's what I've been kind of scouring through Thursdays and Fridays, trying to figure out what's applicable.
Okay, so we'll talk about cemetery fees here in a little bit. Is there anything else regarding these the township precautions and plan for opening?
I think it makes a great deal of sense to, once we have staff back in the building, that we have, they have a period of time to get their offices in order, and whatever, precautions need to be made, where we put, tape on the floor to keep people, separated and that sort of thing. I think it makes sense to have that time to allow them to do that. And so I think this basic plan is a good one.
Are we going to have the township hall professionally cleaned again before we open to the public? Or are we doing any ongoing for a while after we do open for the public?
So right now, on a consistent basis, on Wednesdays, we have the company come up and do the fogging of the police department and the cruisers. So far, the DPW portion, the offices over there have been fogged 2 times. They've done Oni, they've done the library, and then they've done the rest of Township Hall. So I have a commitment from the company that they're coming up on Wednesdays to perform the police department, but I would have to ensure that they would be able to perform anything else besides that.
Yeah, so we can get a fogging done of the township hall. Cleaning is going to be done by cleaning staff, and of course everybody is responsible for doing the detailed cleaning of their offices. We've got a bunch of supplies on order to be able to contend with that. Okay, I make a motion we approve the Oscoda Township Government virus precautions for 11 May 2020 version 1.2 that will consist of a change of language regarding water shutoffs.
Support.
Motion by Mr. Weed, support by Mr. Palmer. Roll call.
Mr. Cummings,
Yes.
Ms. McGuire,
Yes.
Mr. Gieske,
Yes.
Mr. Palmer,
Yes.
Mr. Nordine, yes. Mr. Byer,
Yes.
Mr. Weed.
Yes, motion is passed. For the Old Orchard Park Campground virus precautions and their plan for opening. Anybody have comments regarding that?
Just that it was really well written, and I was happy to see it.
Well, I can't take credit for that. That was predominantly Al and his group out there at Old Orchard Park, and basically being able to detail what it's going to take. It's unfortunate that we're not able to bring those employees back and start doing the prep, but that's what the order states. So.
And I think number 8 in that list, where he proposes that the park not be open until 24 days after the staff has come back to do the work that needs to be done there. I think that's reasonable. I would have thought maybe a little longer than 24 days, but he knows his people and what they can do, and he details all the things that need to be done. And I think that's a reasonable proposal, and it certainly will delay the opening of the park. You know, a lot of people are not going to be happy about that, but these are the times we're in. So I think it's a good proposal that he's put forward here.
All right, do we have a motion for this?
I'll make a motion that we approve the Old Orchard Park campgrounds virus precautions and plan for opening.
Support.
Support.
Motion by Mr. Palmer, support by Ms. McGuire. Roll call.
Mr. Byer,
Yes.
Mr. Palmer,
Yes.
Mr. Gasky,
Yes.
Ms. McGuire,
Yes.
Mr. Cummings,
Yes.
Mr. Nordine, yes, Mr. Weed.
Yes, motion's passed. The library virus precautions and plan for openings. Anybody have comments for that?
The only question I have is that in the Old Orchard Park one, we stated that we weren't going to open the bathrooms out there, the bathhouse, for obvious reasons. So how is that going to affect the library's reopen? It doesn't say anything in there about the bathrooms being open or closed.
So the library is going to open when all the restrictions are lifted. And the same goes with the parks. When the restrictions are lifted, then we can get back into the bathroom maintenance. The distinct difference is that the general parks and the libraries have been specifically mentioned in the governor's orders. So there will be something that there'll be some things that depend on what she says, what the governor says about that.
So they won't reopen unless they can use the bathroom facilities.
When they reopen, the bathrooms will be available.
Okay.
Unless the governor does some sort of thing that makes libraries partially open or what, we just don't know.
I know Diana's been trying to coordinate with the district library, specifically reaching out to other branches as far as how that's going to operate, if there's going to be any guidance from the district library as far as opening curbside, or if there's going to be any kind of phase-in approach. We don't have that yet, and so the best we have right now is kind of a consensus from what's going on with the different branches within the library system.
Well, the plan for the library seems to be different than the plan for reopening Township Hall, with like limiting numbers of people within the library. Groups of people must wear a mask. I think we should be consistent across the different facilities of the township, and I don't know that this that's outlined for the library is the way necessarily we should go about Township Hall or the library, for that matter.
I don't know if we can be consistent because, like I said, the governor has stated specific things about libraries that she hasn't about township halls or municipal halls.
Could you point me in the direction of those references?
In her executive orders.
Yeah, could you give me which order?
Sure, I could spend time looking it up, but I'm not going to do that right now. But there are orders where she said that libraries will remain closed or something like that, and so we just don't know if she's going to come up with another executive order that outlines something else specific to a library that we just can't foresee.
Sure, but we can only operate off what we have right now, and I guess back to my point, I don't know that the limiting the number of people on the masks, I don't know, I'm not aware of an order saying only 15 people can be in a library at a given time when they reopen, or they must wear a mask, things of that nature. So, and that's the point I'm trying to make, I guess, is I'm not sure we should be doing that for the library, and I think we should be consistent if we can be. I guess I see your point that she may distinguish something about libraries, but at this point, there's none of that would make a library be different than the township about numbers of people or having to wear a mask.
So maybe I misunderstood here. Are you saying that something in the library process should be carried over into the township hall process?
I'm just saying they should be the same and consistent to the extent possible. And when it comes time to open, I don't know that we're going to be limiting the number of people in the township hall to 15 people or making them all wear a mask. I guess bottom line, I don't necessarily think that's necessary for the library. And then if we're being consistent, logically, I think we would carry that over to the township hall. And I don't know that that's necessary for the township hall either.
Well, the library could end up, they do end up at times where they have groups of people that arrive. They could have 20, 30 children show up at one time, or a group of adults show up for something at one time. We don't generally have that happen at the township hall.
Yeah. I
think
guess I still don't see the need to limit it to 15 people and to make, and the need to wear a mask. I don't know that that's.
I think there's a difference in comparison here between the library and township hall. Going to a library is an optional activity. It isn't something that's required. And this proposal is only for 30 days to do an evaluation, then make a recommendation after that. Township hall is for people to come in and conduct business. So it's in my thinking, it's more critical that people are able to come into township hall than are able to come into the district library. I mean, they're talking about not having the computer systems available. I think you can place more restrictions on what's being done in the library than you can at the township hall, simply because of the nature of the two beasts. But I think these recommendations by the librarian are reasonable, and I don't think it's necessary to have the same restrictions on the library that you would have on the township hall. They're two different purposes for people to attend. So I just don't see the point there.
Sure. Okay. I guess I would say then, just because you can impose stricter restrictions on something doesn't mean you should. So I guess suffice it to say, I disagree with the limitation of people and the masks.
Well, and again, she's proposing this for 30 days. And at the end of that 30 days, do a reevaluation and see where things are at. To put something in place for 30 days, I don't think is unreasonable.
So this is 30 days after the governor says they can open?
Yes.
Okay.
And I mean, if you look, John, the Executive Order 2020-69 talks about 1E, libraries and museums, effective immediately, continuing until May 28th. The following places of public accommodation are closed to ingress, egress, use, and occupancy by members of the public. Doesn't specifically talk about local government township halls. Mentions specifically, 1E talks about libraries and museums.
I appreciate the reference to the source. But similar to what we talked about before, in order to prevent a circular discussion, I've shared my thoughts, so I don't want to perpetuate the discussion any longer than we have to.
Are there any other comments? Is there a motion?
I'll make a motion that we accept the Robert J. Parks Library virus precautions and plan for reopening as presented.
So
I would support that.
Motion by Mr. Palmer, support by Mr. Byer. Roll call.
Dwyer.
I don't think he heard you.
Ms. McGuire?
Yes.
Oh, sorry, bent over. Mr. Gajewski?
Yes.
Mr. Palmer?
Yes.
Mr. Nordine, no. Mr. Byer?
Yes.
Mr. Cummings?
yes.
Mr. Weed?
Yes, motion's passed. Okay, so let's try and resolve what we can here regarding the cemetery fees. What's the board want to do about handling of fees during the COVID?
Is there a need for more discussion?
Yeah, I don't think we settled anything.
I'm not sure anything's going to be settled without a motion. I don't know that this protracted discussion is making progress.
Well, usually the motions come after a healthy discussion. So I don't know that the motion's going to necessarily yield any result other than, you know, a decision one way or the other and an end to discussion. Unless, of course, we get into another email battle after the meeting.
So does anybody have a motion? I make a motion, we allow cemetery fees to be paid at the time of burial, up to the time of burial, during the COVID crisis, and as soon as the governor has lifted restrictions, then we go back to the normal process.
That is our
Support.
normal. That is our normal process.
To take fees up to the burial?
As long as it's paid before we dig the hole, we take their money.
No, this is up to burial. This is up to, oh, Lord. Further define the motion. That we allow payment up to the time of the burial proceedings, the physical putting the individual into the plot, the payment can be made.
I don't think that's the question, isn't it? Who's accepting the cash
I agree.
or the check? That doesn't have any, the payment part doesn't make any, it's still the same. I thought we were debating on who was accepting the payment.
Yeah, because I view this motion as kind of the scenario I laid out where they could use a Dropbox up until the moment of. But I think the distinguishing factor is who's taking the money.
Well, the payment can be taken by the township individual who is at the burial.
I think that's the clarity that you need.
So if the treasurer wants to be at the burial and to accept money, so be it. If that's DPW, so be it.
I think that's a horrible scenario to put the people that are trying to bury somebody in.
Do you have a motion, Jamie?
I'll make a motion that we don't deviate from the process that we have in place as much as possible and try to accommodate the families where necessary.
Well, I don't know what that means.
Okay,
I
well
don't
then,
understand the accommodation.
well, try going out of my way. I'll come in on a Saturday to take the payment in the Dropbox or check to make sure the payment's made, or confer with the funeral home myself and cut Tammy out of the middle, or whatever we have to do, so that the people that are bereaved don't have to deal with this at the gravesite.
So you're saying it should be done before the grave is even dug?
Correct.
Seems to me that the family of the deceased is going to have to make some contact with the township beforehand, even if they're from out of town or out of state. There's got to be some communication to arrange for a burial. They don't expect to just show up at the cemetery and a hole being dug, and at that communication, you can tell them then that, by the way, these are the fees, and this has to be paid, and I recommend 2 days before let's say you're going to have a burial on a Wednesday, then by Monday, close of business on Monday, this payment has to be made to our Treasury Department, and these are the ways we can do this. We have a drop box out back, but I think you need 2 days to verify that the money is there.
Sometimes we don't have that much time on an immediate burial.
How many immediate burials do we have?
Well, the first one after the COVID hit was an immediate burial.
Is that right? The person had to be in the ground immediately?
Because they weren't embalmed.
Oh.
But if they're not embalmed, they have to be buried within a certain amount of hours, like 72 hours or something like that. I'm not sure.
Well, make that an exception to what I just said. 2 days regular. If it's a COVID death, then we will have to bend to a higher level of government's rules. But we're only talking about a month or two here, aren't we? I mean, I think we're being a little picky for that short amount of time.
So I made a motion. Do you have that motion, Mr. Nordine?
I've got accept cemetery fees up to the time of burial proceedings, and then I kind of missed the physical body being put in the ground is kind of what I have. Some clarification would be good though. As long as, and then it goes on to say, as long as the virus situation is on, then we revert back to normal.
Right. So until the governor lifts COVID restrictions, the township can take burial payments up to the time of the burial occurring, and the payment can be provided to a township employee that is on site.
Support.
Motion by Mr. Weed, support by Mr. Palmer. Roll call.
Mr. Palmer.
Yes.
Mr. Nordine, no. Mr. Gajewski. Mr. Gajewski.
Yes.
Ms. McGuire.
No.
Mr. Byer.
Yes, I think we can do this for a short amount of time, yes.
Mr. Cummings.
Yes.
Mr. Weed.
Yes, motion's passed. Okay, on the superintendent report, proposed 2020 appropriations increase for the general fund, parks and recreation.
All right, so your packet contains an email from the executive secretary associated with the coding of row invoices. More specifically, this is directly related to rows work performed phase 3 of the Iosco Exploration Trail Bike Path Project. I'm asking the Township Board to increase the 2020 appropriations for General Fund 101-751-880-572 Parks and Recreation from the current $0 up to $12,230. This would increase total 2020 appropriations for the General Fund from $3,201,968 up to $3,214,198.
Any comments?
Yeah. Yeah, between both these gentlemen, they got 54 and a half hours. What did them 54 and a half hours consist of?
So
All they give us is hours.
what's that?
All they give us is hours. I mean, is it all travel time? Is it on the site or what?
So a lot of this had to do with the rework of the actual plans. So when we got the initial plan submitted to MDOT, they came back with a slew of comments associated with why the project wasn't going to get funded. And we had to hash out several alternatives. Ro actually had to meet with MDOT in Lansing to go over very specific issues that then had to get reworked into the plan. You'll note that this was a rework based on the local contribution. The minimum local contribution was originally 20%. Even though that was the minimum local contribution, MDOT further explained that that was not competitive. And to be able to get a more competitive local match, we had to reduce the project, and that being reduce it down to foot site, as well as contend with the different comments from MDOT. So a lot of it was spent actually attending the bike path meetings within the local community, as well as working with MDOT and Lansing to be able to rework the plans to get it to where it's at now.
I remember them trying to rework it and that, but seems that's a lot of hours to put in.
And is Rick still on the line here with us?
He is. He's muted. I see him trying to talk.
One thing I would like, and I think I pointed this out once before on your invoice, it has design engineering for phase 3, 6.2 miles along Ridge Road. We are actually on River Road.
Right. You are correct. We will get that corrected. And again, to just reiterate what Dave said, this is the rework. We had like 3 alternatives that we had to try to resolve around Desi's and the dam store. The original concept was to go across Desi's parking lot behind the dam store. That's what we initially worked out and put out there. Meeting with the property owners, we found out that the information from before did not indicate that there was behind the dam store was their septic field. So we could not put the trail over the top of their septic field. And then with that, we came through a couple of different alternatives of going behind and through Foot Village on the gravel roads. That was rejected because, again, it was putting the trail on a roadway that could also intermix with vehicles. More, we didn't feel, and the committee didn't feel that it was an issue. MDOT did. Then the resolution of the final one that's been accepted is going along the shoulder, working with Iosco County Road Commission. That was a couple of meetings with Bruce Boland at the Road Commission, and then meeting, as Dave said, with Bruce Cosbon and his staff in Lansing, and then also over the phone. And then with the funding aspect of it, we broke the project into 2 phases. They're ending at Foot Village, which gets the local percentage up to that competitive amount that Dave mentioned, as far as that goes. So it at face value, I agree. It's a lot of hours, but there were 3 or 4 iterations in there, and several items going back and forth that needed to be resolved to get us to the point that we're at today.
Hey, Rick, thanks.
Yes.
And I would just like to comment on that briefly here, because Rick's being kind here, but we were quite frankly put through the ringer by MDOT. We held a meeting where we all congregated out at Foot Village, a number of us from the IET committee. There were 2 people from MDOT that were on scene, and were there able to look at the situation and what we're dealing with the situation. And when it came time for us to submit our grant applications, they would turn it down at it seemed like at every turn there was something that they would have a problem with. And so then we would have to go back to Roe and have them look into it and make some adjustments. They would submit that to MDOT. They would kick it back again. They would never tell us what needed to be done. They would just tell us, well, you can't do that. And they were on site and were aware of it's a difficult situation out there going through Foot Village. And I would have to say, I commend Roe Engineering for keeping the prices of what they're charging here at what they are, because they had to rework work that they'd already done and do it 3 or 4 times in a row to try and accommodate MDOT. And we're still not there, but they've gotten us close. So I know it's these additional costs. If there was some way we could bill MDOT for these additional costs, because that's where they should go, but unfortunately we can't do that. So that's just my feeling about this whole situation, that MDOT has just been a nightmare for us to work with, and especially since they were on scene with 2 of the people from MDOT to see what the situation was. So
is there any indication as to why they're behaving this way?
A lot of it has to do, Mr. Cummings, the fact that their personnel has changed. These trail projects, as you're well aware, are several years in the making. When the initial concept is laid out there, from point of beginning to point of ending of all the different phases, that was, you gentlemen, the board knows obviously more than I do, but probably 6-7 years ago, maybe, when this all started. Well, the personnel that was in place with MDOT at that time have since moved on. At that time also, we had a governor that was supportive of these endeavors. The current administration is not necessarily supportive of non-motorized trails, so it has not remained a priority for MDOT. So as Mr. Palmer said, and I know Mr. Weed has said in past meetings, every opportunity they had to be vague in what they wanted to see, they did. So basically what we ended up doing is getting local concurrence on an alternative. So that's where a couple of meetings with the road commission led to the resolution that got it resolved, and then basically laying it out in front of MDOT in Lansing that says, per the guidelines, per the trail guidelines, per the design guidelines, there's nothing here that does not fit the criteria for non-motorized trails. And we also laid out several other locations throughout the state that similar activities and actions were undertaken, I'm sorry. And once we presented it that way to them, they really didn't have any alternative but approve what we were laying out there. So
wow.
So that's kind of where it's at. And again, I think we're now based on the email we got earlier this week, I think we're at a point where if the funding becomes available through the TAP grant, it matches up with the local commitment you've already got out there, that we finally will have a project that can move forward to construction.
Unbelievable. Thank you. I appreciate your patience.
I'm not going anywhere.
Any other comments or a motion?
Yeah, I would make a motion to approve the 2020 appropriations for General Fund 101-751-880-75572 Parks and Recreation from $0 to $12,230.
Support.
Motion by Mr. Palmer, support by Mr. Byer. Roll call.
Sorry, Mr. Byer.
Yes.
Mr. Cummings.
Yes.
Mr. Palmer.
Yes.
Mr. Nordine, yes. Mr. Gieske.
Yes.
Ms. McGuire.
Yes.
Mr. Weed.
Yes, motion's passed. Rinse station at Ken Ratliff Park.
All right, so your packet contains a $2,070 quote from Design Industrial to install a new rinse station at Ken Ratliff Memorial Park with ADA compliant push button shower. Board members will remember previous discussions with much more expensive options provided. The $2,070 quote from Design Industrial incorporates the DPW staff performing work to prepare the site for this installation. Although this is much less than the $15,000 purchasing limit, seeking the Township Board approval to move forward with the rinse station at Ken Ratliff Memorial Park.
Comments?
I have one comment here. Last year at several of the VILA meetings, it was I was approached after the health department had placed the signs at the beach park or at the Ratliff Beach about concerning the foam and so on. They were concerned that we should have a rinse station there, and so the township took it upon ourselves to look into doing that. And as Mr. Schaefer mentioned, the original price was quite extensive. And but since then, I've spoken with several VILA members and about they wanted to help with funding this since they've been pushing it, and now that it's a little more reasonable price. And just this morning, I received a phone call from Rick Copeland, the president of the VILA board. They had a board Zoom meeting last Saturday, and they approved paying for this rinse station. The only requirement is they'd like to have a plaque or a sign put up saying that the rinse station was donated by the Venant Lake Association. But they will be sending in a check for $2,070 in the very near future.
Well, that's incredible.
Yeah, that's wonderful.
I had a question. Is this going to be a heated rinse station?
No, sir.
No.
Why is there gas line involved in the quote? Can you check into that, Dave?
I can check into that, but no, there is not going to be. This is going to be at.
Just a cold water rinse, right?
Yes, sir.
I think what you're looking at, Martin, is the things that are excluded are gas pipe.
Yep.
Oh, is that what it is?
Yeah, it says the included items, and then it said excluded items.
Okay, then I misread it. Thanks, Bell.
Sure.
Any other comments or a motion?
I would like to make a motion to approve the $2,070 quote from Industrial Design for the rinse station at Ratliff Park.
Support.
Motion by Mr. Palmer, support by Ms. McGuire. Roll call.
Mr. Gieske.
Yes.
Mr. Palmer.
Yes.
Mr. Nordine, yes. Mr. Byer.
Yes.
Mr. Cummings.
Yes.
Ms. McGuire.
Yes.
Mr. Weed.
Yes. And thank you, Vela, for contributing to the community. Really appreciate that. Purchase of personal protective equipment.
All right, so your packet contains an invoice from Superior Lake Investments for $255 for 300 disposable face masks. That comes out to 85 cents per disposable mask. I want the board to understand that the supply of PPE is limited. Township's working with several different vendors to obtain the PPE quantities needed. The first 300 disposable masks have already been delivered since then. Last Saturday, another 1,500 have been delivered. And to kind of quantify this, I'm not just, you know, pulling these numbers out of thin air, but basically, if you think about 3,500 masks, all right, Old Orchard Park has a staffing authorization of up to 43 workers, and so about 2,600 face masks would last them about 60 days if you have one mask per worker a day. 900 face masks would last a DPW staff of 14 workers of 60 days or 2 months. And so what we're trying to be able to do, you know, 2,600 plus 900, that's about 3,500. We're trying to get this ordered and in. It's just limited supply from, you know, what we're being, where our normal vendors have everything on back order. We're trying to get the stuff in as quickly as possible. The entirety of the expenditures will be less than the 15,000. I'm just giving you a narrative tonight as far as the steps so far. I did attend a FEMA webinar this morning at 10:30 associated with the potential for reimbursements to local governments for COVID-19 related expenses. This is kind of a new situation for FEMA, and this type of funding is typically unlocked during a natural disaster. And so we've already set up a login through their grants matrix to be able to get in and start the process. However, more rules and regulations and the slides associated with the and references to the applicable and reimbursable expenses, the rules associated with that, more information to come. I do know it was also attended by the Iosco County Sheriff's Office, and the Sheriff's Office has a similar login, and so between the two of us, we will be able to help at least submit for some sort of reimbursement associated with this PPE.
Cool. Thank you for getting that ready for us.
No problem.
Any questions on that? All right, then on to other. Discuss Township Board meeting scheduled for May 26th.
All right, so the initial intent was to have the auditor come and present the 2019 financials to the Township Board on Tuesday, May 26th. Unfortunately, that is not going to be an in-person meeting. It's going to be very difficult to have that presentation over Zoom. What I want to be able to, you know, get board feedback. Do we want to still go ahead and keep that meeting scheduled for May 26th? So that would coincide prior to employees returning back to work. It's a little over 2 weeks away. If something changes with the governor's orders, that would be an opportunity to be able to discuss that, or simply bump the next regularly scheduled township board meeting to the 8th of June.
What are your thoughts?
At this point, with the fluid situation, I'd like to have the meeting still go forward on Tuesday, May 26th, even though we will not be having the 2019 financials presented.
So the audit presentation's already been canceled?
Yeah, so right now,
It's not been canceled, it's been rescheduled.
yeah, we can't.
Canceled from that agenda is what I'm saying.
Yes. The auditors, I mean, we can't have an in-person meeting and put your physical hands on a bound copy of the audit report and go through the presentation. So it's going to be a difficult one to have over Zoom.
And the expectation at this point is that should we be reopening as, given everything we've been told and everything we know right now from the governor, that June 8th would be an in-person physical meeting again.
Right now, that's the assumption.
Mhm.
However, I think that even if things were to get extended, I think we're just going to, if June 8th should be the latest that we have the audit report. So whether that's in person or in Zoom, then so be it.
And June 8th is the usual time frame for the presentation, correct?
It is. The only deadline they're up against is June 30th. Everything has to be filed with the Department of Treasury at this point by June 30th. So once the financials are presented, then they actually have to go into the system and submit everything through the Department of Treasury.
Well, I know typically we wouldn't have a meeting on Memorial Day weekend, but these are not normal times. I think it probably would be important to have a meeting on the 26th, if nothing more than to discuss what the latest actions are by the governor to be able to have a more distinct view of what we're going to be able to do with opening Township Hall and various other things. So typically I would, not be in favor of having a meeting on Memorial Day weekend, but these are not normal times. So I think that would be important to have. I think, it could probably be a brief meeting, although
you got to be dreaming, Bill.
Yeah, sitting here looking at my clock at almost 9:30, I guess that's kind of a shot to the moon, but I think it probably would be a good idea for us to meet on the 26th.
Okay.
Everybody good with keeping the meeting on the 26th?
Yeah, yep. It's scheduled. We just have to cancel, but I think I'm hearing to move forward with that.
Yep.
All right, so
Yes.
we're approaching our 2.5-hour mark, and so we got to determine if we're going to continue this meeting. We do have 2 items that are time critical.
I move that we extend the meeting to cover the rest of the agenda.
Support.
Motion by Mr. Byer, support by Ms. McGuire. Roll call.
Mr. Gasky.
Yes.
Ms. McGuire.
Yes.
Mr. Byer.
Yes.
Mr. Cummings.
Yes.
Mr. Palmer.
Yes.
Mr. Nordine, yes. Mr. Weed.
Yes, motion's passed. 2019 EMS response times.
All right, so this was a follow-up, basically on the April 13th meeting. This was discussed. It was bumped to May. At this point, the EMS response times as well, they haven't changed from 2019. At the most recent meeting of the Iosco County Board of Commissioners, it was held last Wednesday, the 6th. There was a resolution passed, and to summarize, it was to increase the millage rate from about 0.44%, or I'm sorry, 0.44 mils to 0.6 mils on a 2-year basis. So obviously that affects the amount of money to be levied for EMS services, which is an increase. So that was the most recent update I had.
And then the appoint elected official to the Iosco County 911 Board. So I know that several of us have expressed concerns about the response times. So again, re-engaging the board. You guys had some time to think about it. if you want to have an elected representation on that board from our board, or do you want to maintain it with the superintendent on that board?
Would the elected official be in place of the superintendent or in addition to the superintendent?
However the board wants to do that, whether that's the elected official being the primary superintendent alternate or vice versa.
Okay. How often does this board meet?
Once every other month. 6 times per year.
Well, if you need a candidate, I'm willing to do that. But if someone else is more interested, but I'm a little more capable of being at meetings like that now for obvious reasons. So I'll just throw my name out, but no hard feelings if someone else wants it really bad. That's okay.
Any other input?
I'll make a motion that we appoint Mr. Byer to the 911 board in replacement of the superintendent.
Is there support?
Yeah, I'll support it.
Motion by Ms. McGuire, support by Mr. Nordine. Roll call?
Ms. McGuire,
Yes.
Mr. Cummings,
No.
Mr. Nordine, yes. Mr. Byer,
Yes.
Mr. Palmer,
No.
Mr. Gajewski,
No.
Mr. Weed,
No. Motion's failed. I make a motion that we appoint Mr. Byer as our 911 board representative with the superintendent being an alternate.
support.
Support.
Motion by Mr. Weed, support by Mr. Nordine.
We gotta clarify the second. That wasn't me.
Oh, who said support?
I did.
Oh, Mr. Gajewski supported. Okay, roll call?
Mr. Nordine, yes. Mr. Gajewski,
Yes.
Ms. McGuire,
Yes.
Mr. Byer,
Yes.
Mr. Cummings,
Yes.
Mr. Palmer,
Yes.
Mr. Weed.
Yes, motion's passed. Beckett and Rader proposal for the master plan.
All right, so you see a memo from the zoning administrator, and this was recommended by the Planning Commission at the meeting last Monday, the 4th of May. What you can see in there is basically the professional fee associated would be at a cost of not to exceed $8,500. There will be some specific work, revisions to Chapter 7, Chapter 9, Chapter 10. And again, this would be an exercise of implementing the 2019 SCOTA strategic plan and get the master plan in line with RRC certification requirements.
Any comments?
Yeah, I'm trying to understand, when is this going to occur? So these are at the past meetings. So when would this occur?
So this would occur during 2020.
Oh, to some point during. Okay, got it.
And as the board will probably recall, this was for the 2018 master plan. It was my feeling we didn't get a very good product at the time. It took 2 years to get the master plan put in place, and it's not unusual to have to go back and update a master plan. We probably will have to do that again in a couple more years after the census has been taken and that information is put out. So we originally, the quote from Beckett Rader was more than that. But when we went back to them and said, well, all we need is a revision on a couple of the items, that's when they came back with the 8,500 number, which I think is reasonable. I think we'll get a better product from them than what we got the first go around.
Any other comments or a motion?
I would make a motion that we accept the agreement from Beckett and Rader for the adjusting the master plan in the amount of $8,500.
I'll support it.
Support.
Motion by Mr. Palmer, support by Mr. Weed. Roll call.
Mr. Cummings,
Yes.
Mr. Nordine, yes. Mr. Byer,
Yes.
Mr. Palmer,
Yes.
Mr. Gaske,
Yes.
Ms. McGuire,
Yes.
Mr. Weed.
Yes, motion's passed. Row RFQ for SRF.
All right, so what you'll see in here, included within the packet, is a request for statements of qualifications for the SRF planning, design, and construction services. And again, this goes back to the sanitary sewer projects outlined in the SAW grant. What you'll see is proposals should be submitted to me no later than 3 p.m. May 26, 2020. You'll see an email in there from Roe, from Rick, as well as the request for qualifications. This is very specific to having the engineering fees associated with the project qualify for SRF funding. This is a requirement to be able to have this.
Well, that was my question, is when I read through this, I didn't really see the point of having this. I don't know how we could find an engineering firm that would have more qualifications, since their fee isn't part of the request. It's simply their qualifications. And I don't know how the two engineering firms we already have working here, that being Roe and more specifically F&V, who both have, and especially F&V, have an intimate knowledge of our system, how we could find another engineering firm with more qualifications. But if it's a requirement of Eagle that we pursue that, then I guess we need to pursue that. It just seemed to be a kind of a waste of time from what I originally looked at. But if and I think Rick mentioned that in his earlier statements, that it is a requirement that we do this. So
I agree with your point, though, Bill. It is sort of a waste of time, but a formality I guess we have to follow.
Right.
Any other comments or a motion?
How does the prices and the rate schedules not being considered or provided, how does that work with if we have to make a selection and then they name a price afterwards, or?
Yes, you would base the Eagle, because it's public dollars. Eagle requires that you make a selection based on qualifications, and then you negotiate the fee with the selected firm. And if those negotiations are successful, you can enter into an agreement with them, and all of that cost then associated with your engineering, your design engineering, finishing the planning side, engineering design, and the construction engineering would be eligible to be paid through this funding application. So that's the reason they go through it. The township obviously has went through a qualification-based selection in the past, but the reason you have to go through it on this, it has to be specific to the elements of the SRF plan. So that's why you can't use a past process that you've went through to meet their requirement.
Anybody have anything else? Is there a motion?
I'll make a motion that we submit the proposed RFQ for the SRF project as outlined.
Support.
Motion by Mr. Palmer, support by Ms. McGuire. Roll call.
Mr. Palmer,
Yes.
Mr. Nordine, yes. Mr. Gasky,
Yes.
Ms. McGuire,
Yes.
Mr. Byer,
Yes.
Mr. Cummings,
Yes.
Mr. Weed.
Yes, motion's passed. Row phase 1 change order for John Henry.
All right, so what this entails is the phase 1 water service installation to be completed. It's a change order that is not to exceed $117,150, and it's depending on the length of the service and needs for boring. So what you have in your packet is an email from Rick that breaks down the majority of the cost, $97,650 being the Rose Lane water system, the 1-inch main tap for $2,950, as well as the property line to the home. So basically the change order from John Henry of the base bid of $4,400 was extended from last year phase 1 into phase 2. And again, Rick is here if you have specific questions on this change order for John Henry.
Comments?
I was curious, how many connections would this entail? How many homes are we talking about?
Well, what it entails for Rose Lane is from the meter pit that was installed in phase 1 is running a 2-inch service down the center of the road for the mobile home park. And if I remember right, I think it is connecting 15 trailers, I believe it is. Don't hold me to that exact number, but it's somewhere in there, because obviously that changes. We're only connecting trailers that are being currently occupied. We're not doing vacant lots within the trailer park or vacant trailers. So there's that. Then we have 2 residents just to the east of Forest that we did last year, and those 2 addresses, as I mentioned earlier, are 4287 and 4311 Bissonnet. I've talked to Whispering Woods, Rose Lane. I talked to Mr. Moss. He's on board. The 97,650 is the number that we had worked with John Henry last summer on for that project. As Mr. Schaefer said, the 2 services right now being estimated at $4,400 each. That could vary a little bit based on the length from the road. The only thing that we had not incorporated last year in any of the prices was the fact that on here, the water main's on the south side of Bissonnet, so they've got to actually bore underneath the road in 2 locations. That's the $2,950. It'll be $2,950 for each of those. And that still leaves us a little bit of a contingency around $5,000 for any unknown costs. And that is all within the budget that we established for the special appropriations that the township has gotten in those 2 instances, with what we completed last year on phase 1, and with what of those appropriations is still remaining. So we're within budget based on this recommended change order. And like I said, we've got approximately $5,000 of contingency sitting there if we need it. So.
Okay, so that was my next question is, do we still have funds
Yes.
left from the phase one to cover the $117,150?
That is correct.
Okay.
A 2-inch water main, Rick, is that going the full length of the trailer park?
Yes, it'll go, yep, from currently their well system is at the northern end. And basically we're gonna run down the center, about halfway down, can't remember exactly, halfway down, there is a kind of a vacant easement lot that goes out to Forest. So we're gonna be able to make a loop there so that it's not a dead end line. And then, like I said, we're only going to put in service courts and that to the actual lots that are occupied. And then it will have a master meter out at the road at Bissonnet so that the township will only be billing the Whispering Woods as far as, one bill going to that, and then he distributes it inside.
That loop is what I was concerned with.
Yep. And then obviously we'll be disconnecting their wells. And I've got just got the information from the assessor today. So we will get the property owner approval and easement documents out to the two properties on Bissonnet, and assuming that they will accept the project, then John Henry will be able to start as soon as he can mobilize. It sounded like he was available to start work on this right away. So.
This will complete all phase one then?
This will complete everything that, yes, the township had looked for on phase one, I believe.
Okay.
Well, it's nice to see that John Henry's holding the same price for the connections as he had last year.
Yep. And the fact that we've got John Wilson, who did the inspection on phase one last year, up on phase two, John will be able to keep an eye on this construction also, and no additional costs from Rowe.
It's even better.
Any other comments or a motion?
Well, I would make a motion that we approve the change order with John Henry Incorporated on their contract for phase one water service installations in an amount not to exceed $117,150.
Support.
Motion by Mr. Palmer, support by Mr. Cummings. Roll call.
Mr. Dwyer.
Yes.
Mr. Byer.
Yes.
Mr. Cummings.
Yes.
Mr. Palmer.
Yes.
Mr. Nordine, yes. Mr. Gasky.
Yes.
Mr. Weed.
Yes, motion's passed. Recommended changes to the beach and water sports application and fees.
All right, so this is a recommendation coming from the Planning Commission. Their meeting last Monday, the 4th. This was the beach and water sports equipment vendor. You'll see in his memo, it references, I also provide the application. So there's a form in there. Unfortunately, when this went through, there was no differentiation between the motorized fee and the non-motorized fee. And obviously, there is a significant difference in what somebody can rent a motorized watercraft versus a non-motorized watercraft. And so to be able to differentiate that between on the application, you will see quite a difference in fees there based on the amount that can be charged for a motorized versus a non-motorized fee.
Any comments?
On the application, just under the first box there, it reads, please read ordinance 2019-01 attached. Excuse me. That number, I believe, was changed to 2019-262.
262.
Yep.
I got you, sir. Thank you for that.
You're welcome.
262.
Any other comments?
And so, and then I guess I do have another one. It's the application is 2 pages. Then there's a third page that lists the fee, like a heading for the fees, and then the fees themselves. That's supposed to be in resolution format, or do we need to adopt this in resolution format at all?
So the original application just had the just had the fees associated, but there was no differentiation between that non-motorized and motorized. So simply a column was added for non-motorized.
Okay, so what's the third page?
Would that be the resolution for the board to approve the fees? Because typically the board approves, it's the township board that approves fees in a resolution form. I think that was John's question originally.
Yeah.
The third page, number 2, number 3. Oh, this goes in there. There's no resolution. All right. Let's see what I see your question.
I think there was a resolution at one time approving the fees for the motorized. So this would just be in addition to that resolution, I think. I was kind of surprised when I learned that we hadn't approved the non-motorized fees. I had a list of those fees that I had proposed, and apparently it didn't go anywhere, but I think these fees are reasonable.
Further comments?
When they pay the fee, does that money directly get deposited right away, or does that have to be wait till the planning commission approves that?
No.
Application.
Looks like there's an administrative, looks like it's approved by the zoning administrator.
Okay. And then the money would be deposited after the zoning administrator approves it?
Yes.
Thank you.
Do we need to proceed forward with a motion?
I'll make a motion that we approve the changes to the beach and water sports application, but that's it. I guess we'll have to have a resolution for the fees in the future.
Support. Motion by Ms. McGuire, support by Mr. Weed. Roll call.
Byer. Oh, Mr. Byer.
Yes.
Mr. Cummings.
Yes.
Ms. McGuire.
Yes.
Mr. Gieske.
Yes.
Mr. Palmer.
Yes.
Mr. Nordine, yes. Mr. Weed.
Yes, motion's passed. The request from us go to schools.
All right, so what you'll see in the packet is an email from the senior class advisor associated with the Oscoda class of 2020. And due to the fact that the school year has been cut short, so many of the senior activities have been canceled, she's trying to think of ways to honor and recognize Oscoda seniors. And so she is requesting permission to display signs on Furtaw Field associated with the senior class of 2020.
Comments?
I think it's a great idea.
I would agree.
I'll make a motion that we authorize the class of 2020 to post their signs.
Support.
Motion by Ms. McGuire and I don't know, support from everybody? Is that support from support from Mr. Byer?
Sure, pick one.
So support from Mr. Byer?
Okay.
Is that accurate? Mr. Byer?
Begrudgingly.
Yes. Yes.
Okay.
Okay.
Roll call.
Mr. Cummings,
Yes.
Ms. McGuire,
Yes.
Mr. Gieske,
Yes.
Mr. Palmer,
Yes.
Mr. Nordine, yes. Mr. Byer,
Yes.
Mr. Weed.
Yes, motion's passed. All right, number 9, township to conduct quiet title for Woodland Drive.
All right, so this is on phase 2 of the water main. And what you have is basically a paper street. So what this entails is the township obtaining quiet title associated with the portion of the street on Woodland Drive to obtain the necessary easements to place the water infrastructure appropriately. And I know, Rick, does that summarize what you need?
Yes. What it is as Mr. Schaefer just said, this is the portion of Woodland that is not under the jurisdiction of the Iosco County Road Commission. Therefore, it is currently not publicly owned, and therefore we weren't able to include it in the phase 2 project as it stands right now, because we can't place distribution main on private property with state or federal funds. So we did a fairly tremendous amount of research. This area is all platted subdivision. All of the lots in this area exclude this. It's roughly, I think it exists as like a 20-foot strip through there, which is they're using it for their access drive to their properties. So it exists. It exists, but it doesn't belong to anybody based on all of the research that we've done with the title companies, the state plat boards, and the local surveyors up there. So the next step for the township to acquire this easement will be through the quiet title process, which we'll be working with Mr. Eppert on to go through the court system.
Rick, is this west of Loud Drive?
This is, yes, west. This is west of Loud, adjacent to the lake.
Yeah, okay.
Any other comments?
Well, just one comment. Maybe the rest of the board is familiar with what a quiet title. That's a legal term. I recently had a tutorial with my son-in-law. He had a court case that he's staying here with us, where he presented to the judge a quiet title. What a quiet title is when there's property that is in dispute. The sides put the information together and then put it in front of a judge, and he makes a decision. The judge makes a decision on who owns the property, and then that's a quiet title. because after that, there's no other claims that could be made on it. So just, I, when this came up, I was kind of interested that he had explained that to me. I was not familiar with what a quiet title was, but basically that's the gist of a quiet title.
When did this come up?
I'm sorry, what, Mr. Nordin?
When did this come up?
It came up when we were designing phase 2. And again, we had it in there, and again, we were assuming that through the title search and all of that we would find the owner of this, which then we would, and I had discussed it with Mr. Schaefer, that once we had the owner, then we could work with between the township and that owner to acquire the easement. So again, well, then the problem we came up with is we couldn't find the owner. The owner, I won't say that the owner doesn't exist, but there's no record of the owner. So as Mr. Palmer said, yes, you go in front of the judge, you present the information. Then there's also, and I can't remember, I think Mr. Eppert might have mentioned it today, but there is a public notice process that you do advertise it publicly, so that if somebody out there is aware of who the owner is, they have the right to approach the judge with that information. And then once that process is cleared, then the township can take ownership of the property.
That makes sense. This is just the first I've heard of it.
Rick,
Yes.
you made a comment that the people are using this drive to make access to their properties.
Yeah, it's right now. I mean, you go down there. It's a little bit more than a 2-track that goes up there, and those on both sides. There's on the Loud Drive side, some of those residents have driveway access to Loud, and then others have to this, and some of them I think even actually have both. And then obviously on the lake side, that's how they come out to this, and then they go down to the Interlake Loud intersection to get back out of the public roadway.
Okay, so everything clears and say Ascota Township winds up with this property as the owners. Are we required to maintain that as a road?
No, because the easement document that we're going to draft up is that you only will own it for the right of going in there and maintaining the water main.
Good, good. That's what I wanted to hear. Thank you.
Any other comments? I make a motion that the township proceed with quiet title for Woodland Drive's water main project.
Support.
Motion by Mr. Weed, support by Mr. Cummings. Roll call.
Mr. Gajewski.
Yeah.
Ms. McGuire.
Yes.
Mr. Cummings.
Yes.
Mr. Nordin, yes. Mr. Byer.
Yes.
Mr. Palmer.
Yes.
Mr. Weed.
Yes, motion's passed. ECWAG grant advertisement.
All right, so what we have is the email from Mr. Freeman this afternoon associated with the authorization from the board to advertise for a public hearing. And this is to submit the DWRF, the Drinking Water Revolving Fund, the SRF, the State Revolving Fund, and the ECWAG, the Emergency Community Water Assistance Grant applications for the future water and sewer projects on June 22nd, 2020. And so the advertisements would run for 30 days. We would have resolutions on the June 8th meeting to establish public hearings, and then have the public hearings on June 22nd, satisfying the time requirements associated with these.
Comments?
To offer up a little behind it is due to the fact that we were late in getting any response from MEDC on the CBDGIR. We obviously had a couple of other irons in the fire to secure funding for the township. So that's kind of how all this stacked up at the last minute. But we will be able to handle all 3 public hearings in one meeting, should go rather quickly. And then those applications can be submitted, and we will be able then to see where the township might be securing their next round of funding.
Is there a motion?
I'll make a motion that we approve advertising for a public hearing on June 22nd, 2020, relating to the application for the DWRF, SRF, and ECWAG grant process.
Support. Support.
Motion by Mr. Palmer, support by Mr. Cummings. Roll call.
Mr. Palmer,
Yes.
Mr. Gasky. Ms. McGuire,
Yes.
Mr. Cummings,
Yes.
Mr. Nordine, yes. Mr. Byer,
Yes.
Mr. Weed.
Yes, motion's passed. All right, we're into our second public comment period. There is a 4-minute time limit, and when you speak, please introduce yourself. For those people who are on phone, I will unmute you, and those people on the internet, if you can please raise your hand, and then we can start a public comment on that. The little raise hand option should be next to your name. Does anybody have any public comment? Okay, Greg Schultz, did you have something? No, okay. Not seeing any hands raised, any chat items. So we will continue into board comment. Oh, wait, I have a hand raised.
Hi, this is John Aubin, camp at Old Orchard Park. And with the delay, am I correct in understanding that after the governor lifts the order right now, May 28th, there's an additional 24 days before we can move out of campers on?
We can answer your question when you're completed. Do you have anything else for the public comment?
Yes. Will there be a refund issued for the days that we have not been able to camp?
Okay.
And that's
Anything? Okay.
Sir, could I ask for the spelling of your last name?
Yes, A-U-B-I-N.
I appreciate it. Thank you very much.
You're welcome.
All right, so regarding the additional 24 days, that's all the prep work since we don't have park workers currently at the park doing maintenance. It's going to take the 24 days to get everything prepared for the campers to be able to come in. Okay. And then, yeah, we are discussing how we're going to handle proration of the days that people could not camp.
There, if you look at the document within the board packet, there are, you know, obviously different options, and we want to be able to work with people as far as extending the normal camping season as an option for a credit towards seasonal camping for next year, or option of a potential prorated refund based on the number of days. So there will be options.
Do we have access to that document that was submitted by Al?
absolutely. It's online in our agendas on the Oscoda Township website under agendas and meetings.
It's under agendas and meetings. Okay. I wasn't able to see it on this meeting here, so, okay.
I'll attempt before the meeting is done to post a link in the chat if that's helpful.
Oh, that'd be great. Thank you.
Yep.
Actually, I have it up right now, so it's a good idea. I'll put that in there.
I appreciate it. Thank you.
All right. Any other public comment? Okay, then we'll go into board comment. Does anybody have anything?
Yeah, I do have a quick one. I think the 2020 elections are coming up and they're going to proceed. So interested in workers for those elections. Training needs to happen between now and August. Usually it's happening in June, but I'm sure the Bureau of Elections in the county will work with us on how we're going to do that. But I published in the paper and a little bit on the internet, but looking for election inspectors. Obviously it's a paid position. The board knows hourly, and then the training is also paid. So if anybody knows of anybody, or if any member of the public is interested, I can never have enough election inspectors for August and November specifically.
I know it's late, but in the informational items, the board will note the 2019 annual drinking water quality report is in there. There is a new mechanism from Eagle to report foam on Van Etten Lake, and I've shared it with Vela. They promised to get it out to all of their members as far as a new link to report significant foam events on Van Etten. That is in the informational items. There are 2 press releases, one from Congressman Kildee, another from Senator Gary Peters, associated with the PFAS cleanup at Worksmith or the lack thereof. There are also Eagle PFAS webinars coming up on Friday, May 22nd at 1 p.m. and Tuesday, May 26th at 11 a.m. So all the links and everything associated with that is in the informational items.
Okay, and I'll say that on the Phase 2 water main project going up Loud Drive, that this also increases fire hydrant service further up Loud Drive. So that helps with fire protection, and will also help out hopefully with their homeowners insurance. But, you know, in addition to making clean water available to those homes, they're also getting some additional benefits for that. So it's good that we can have that happen for our community. Does anybody have anything else? All right, then I need a motion to adjourn. Motion by Mr. Gajewski. We're adjourned. Have a good night.
Good night.
Thanks, everybody. Stay safe.